Hello, and thanks for joining us for another Q&A Friday, a regular series where we chat about issues facing manufacturing companies. My name is Jessica Vodden, and I'm a team member here at Mountain Point, and I'm joined here by Andrew Reiser, our co-founder and president, and Jim Use, our sales development rep. Hey, guys.
Hey, Jessica.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Absolutely. So, Jim, you're in what we might traditionally refer to as an outbound sales role here at Mountain Point. And when we say outbound sales, what we really mean is that you try to identify individuals who might be in need of our services and then build connections with them, right?
Yes.
Excellent. So I imagine that's not an easy job because, I don't think I'm going to break your heart here when I say this, typically people don't like salespeople interrupting their day. Is that a fair assumption?
That is the truth, yes, all the way to its core.
But people do seem to really like you, and they seem to like talking to you. So we wanted to bring you on today for this episode to talk about, what's the magic? What do you do that is working, and tell us a little bit about your approach.
Oh, I really appreciate that. It's actually a pretty good question. I guess to start my answer, it might sound a little bit cliche, but you kind of need to believe in what it is that you are pitching to a certain extent. And, here at Mountain Point, we're not pitching any sort of a product, we're pitching solutions, right? And that really places me in sort of like a golden position because I love to help people. And any client that ends up coming in for us, I'm helping Mountain Point grow. But then on the flip side, I'm also helping these manufacturing firms solution an issue that they are having. And the way that I approach it, it's sort of broken down into the 4 R's, if you will. So research, relevance, relationship, and resources. And knowing your audience, obviously we're looking for manufacturing firms, but then understanding and addressing their problems is the relevance category, if you will. So I have to identify what their issues are, what problems they're running into, if it's a bottleneck of some sort, and I have to align a potential solution with that. And then going into step 3 is the fun part for me. So the relationship, take time to build trust and engagement over time. And I approach this on a very personal level. So I need to know about them on a professional level, in my opinion, but then also I'd like to know about them on a personal level, as in, are they married? How many kids do they have? Where are they located? How's their family doing? What are their interests? And that gives me an opportunity to sort of, for lack of a better term, celebrate with them in the event that their daughter does really well in a dance recital, or one of their kids graduated high school and they got a scholarship to a university that they wanted to go to. It really sort of, in my opinion, generates a connection that is sort of on another level, if you will. And then step number 4 is resourcing, sort of solving their problems. So steps 3 and 4, I typically try to do in unison with one another. It really just boils down to continuing that relationship that is being formed in step 3 and continuing it through the whole entire buyer journey, if you will, and beyond. And one example of that is a gentleman named John Spurrell that I knew from Raleigh, my time in Raleigh. I haven't worked with him in 2 years. He was a land development manager on a job site that I was working on. And 2 years removed, every time I'm in Raleigh, we always get a round of disc golf in and we always have a couple of beers. So it's just, I guess overall, it's just being personable and being warm on my end and being receptive to what it is that they have to offer and being professional at the same time and driving them towards the solution that they are looking for.
Yeah. It all comes back to that old adage, right? Like, people don't want to do business with companies. They want to do business with people, right? So just understanding who they are, what their needs are, their constraints, both personal and in business, probably goes a long way.
Absolutely. I agree.
So, Jim, I think I have a good sense of your high-level philosophy behind sales, which I think, goes a long way. But, how do you actually get it done? What do your processes look like?
So, as you know, outreach can be cumbersome. And so I leverage Mountain Point's CRM system. We use Salesforce, and I have a very, very strong alignment with marketing. So with you and with Holland as well, in sort of being in tune with company-wise what exactly it is that we are sending out to everybody. I try to leverage automation as much as I can. I know I just got done harping on, having that personal touch, but when you're talking about prospecting, like I said, I'll refer to the word that I used before. It's pretty cumbersome. Sending 1,000 emails can take 2-3 weeks, and being able to generate sort of a personalized message and being able to get it in front of as many people as possible so that I can just sort of take care of the objective of getting them to speak, and then hitting them with sort of the personalized touch is something that is that I do on a regular basis. Without automation, oh man, I'm telling you, my eyes would probably start bleeding.
Right, right. So it's, trying to figure out, you kind of cast a wide net to see who may be responsive or having problems that we can help solve. And then once you start to pinpoint who those folks are who may be expressing some interest, then you start to follow up with that personal touch and really try to gain a sense of their issues and what they're facing.
Absolutely. You got to hit them with the charm.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, like let's walk through a typical scenario, right? So like, let's say that somebody has attended a seminar that we've held or participated in a webinar. So we know they're interested in the topic at hand. We know they're interested in the solution that we've been presenting on or that we're talking about. What do you do from there?
I think first step is aligning with marketing. So essentially, we have an inventory, a bank of resources, and identifying what the topic of that webinar was and making sure that I find a resource that is aligned with that topic. I would probably try to communicate with them, try to call them. Again, just be warm, have high energy on the phone. Just make sure you let them know right off the bat that you're there to try to help them, not sell them something or push something in front of their face, if you will, right? And so once I have identified that they are interested, then I will follow up with an email immediately with that resource and then continue to communicate with them at a specific cadence to make sure that if they need any sort of a resource from my end, that I'm reaching out to my team, making sure that I track it down and I get it to them in a timely manner. Because I've found that the quicker that you engage with somebody and the quicker that you respond to them, the more likely they are to warm up to you and engage in that, let's say, personal conversation and that professional journey at the same time.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's really representative of the approach that we try to take at Mountain, because, we don't do a lot of like sales pitches or a lot of, this is why Mountain Point is the best. Typically from a marketing perspective, and I think that you're right, this carries over very much into sales. What we try to do is really understand the problems that a lot of our clients face or people we work with in the past have faced, and then share our knowledge and share our expertise. And then naturally, people sort of come to us whenever they need help or they want to expand on that idea. And I see you doing that as well. Like, you never just call and say, hey, I'm Mountain Point. Can I get you to sit down and, review like a term of service or, a subscription model with me? You always talk about, okay, like what's going on? How can we help? Here are some problems that we've solved in the past. Here are some resources, some webinars, some articles that might get your team thinking or get you thinking. And, I think that builds a lot of trust with folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely come across a couple of individuals. Part of this deal is also when you're talking about sort of like a discovery phase, if you will. A lot of these people, they might not even know that they have an issue, or they might not know that this software exists that can really help them sort of either streamline a process or gain insights into into the data that's in a sales pipeline or any of those items. And so I essentially see myself as a shepherd of data, of information, of resources. And that's sort of the role that I am still blossoming into, because it'll never hurt me to answer somebody's email saying, hey, do you have any information on a specific topic? And like I said, my marketing team is phenomenal here at Mountain Point. Any sort of resource that I need, it's right on tap. So I'll just send a message real quick. I get a response within 5 minutes. I package it up. I send a link in an email and I fire it off to them. And so it's really just making sure that I approach it in kind of like a humble way, sort of as like I said, a shepherd of good data and good information, and educating individuals in the manufacturing world of the capabilities of and the power of what it is that we're doing for manufacturing firms. It's really cool.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. One of the things that I think is really fascinating too about the Mountain Point sales team is, we're not a team that has quotas, right? Or we don't have to have a certain number of people on the phone each week, or, close a certain number of deals or bring in a certain dollar amount. I mean, and this is really a question for you, Andrew. I mean, I don't know if that's intentional or not, or if it's just the nature of us being a young company, but I think it does kind of free us up to really spend time understanding people's problems and developing those relationships. So is that something we're doing on purpose or no?
I think if you take a step back and look at just sales models in general, so we're not a product company, we're a services company. And I think that there's playbooks all over the place out there, especially in the new world, or I guess it's not new anymore, but for the past 20 years, the world of software as a service. So if you type in sales development and software as a service in Google, you will be inundated with what that playbook looks like. And it's typically cast wide nets and kind of you have those quota driven kind of metrics. So as a sales development rep, you are basically measured by how many connections and conversations you get, but ultimately the number of demos and kind of handoffs to account execs to close deals. And I think that when you have a product that solves a problem in a marketplace, it's much easier to define that process. I think in the services world, a sales model is absolutely different. There's some synergies and some kind of processes that you can build off of, but I think the approach is different. So I think a lot of what Jim shared is how we're starting to approach it. So we think that an inbound and outbound model is a key strategy with any organization that needs to grow and scale. And for us, I kind of compartmentalize Jim's role into like three categories. So category one is we have a real strong focus on value-based selling and kind of growing existing accounts. So like anybody will say, it's much easier to grow existing accounts than it is to go out and find net new accounts. So for us to be successful, we have to make sure that our customers are successful and continue growing those relationships. And in some cases, we have to kind of work at their pace. So as an example, some of our customers, we might only do like one project a year with them, but we have to make sure that we're constantly staying relevant and top of mind, because that 3-month project may be the end of it for that particular calendar year, but then the following year they may have another set of projects. And so if we let that fall off and aren't using our CRM system to do what it's supposed to do, then those types of opportunities can fall through the cracks. So kind of bucket number one, I think for Jim, is maintaining those relationships with existing and past customers. So as our projects wrap up and they say, all right, we're going to focus on adoption for the next 6 months and some internal things, but check back in with us 6 months down the road. If Jim isn't prioritizing that and kind of creating a process around that, then like anybody, we get lost in our day-to-day and may never reach back out, and that could be lost opportunity. So I think category one is staying top of mind and kind of using a CRM for what it's used for to stay engaged with past and existing customers at Mountain Point. Category two, I think, is what you already talked about with a webinar or kind of warm lead scenario where people have already expressed interest in a topic, and making sure that we have a process to follow through with them after that event occurs. Again, to stay top of mind, to thank them for joining the webinar, and to really start teasing out what specific pieces that we had shared resonate with them in their organization. And then the last topic, I think, don't need to expand upon, but that's just your generic outbound. So who are the target customers and the segment that they fit into, and then what are the personas of the buyers. So I think the low-hanging fruit for us is in categories 1 and 2, but I feel like you constantly have to be nurturing and growing from the last category as well to keep all three of those buckets filled.
I think those are all really good points. I kind of want to circle back a little bit to what you mentioned about, the difference between sort of a product sales model and a service sales model. And I think, as you mentioned, we're in service. And so this whole problem solving idea, this value-based selling concept comes really easily because we can show the benefit of working with us and, having somebody there on your team to help you work through your toughest problems. How do you think that applies? And this is a question to either of you. How do you think that applies when you are selling more of a traditional product?
Well, I think the key is what we've been talking about. It's value. It's how are you proactive and quickly understanding what the problem is, but offering solutions and continuously injecting value into the process. I think that if you aren't thinking about what that looks like across any customer journey, then it's inevitably not going to be a long-term kind of strategic partnership. So I think the bright and shiny widgets and the things that kind of solve point solutions are great, but I don't think they take into consideration the bigger picture of what's going on. So I think when you talk about solution or services and what we do, we have to understand all the different moving pieces and how things fit together, almost from like an enterprise architecture standpoint, versus just here's something that you can draw a box around and it solves this super specific problem.
Yeah, and so I guess one of the questions or one of the thoughts that sort of led me to that question is, what we're seeing in the manufacturing realm is, yes, the product is still super important, but we hear this concept or this term of servitization thrown around a lot, right? And so moving beyond just having the product in the value chain and expanding that value chain and finding ways to add value maybe before somebody ever buys your product, and then of course after they've purchased. So, how does that affect the sales outreach that we do?
I think it allows us to better relate because, and in some cases educate, because for us as selling services, a lot of these companies that we work with on the manufacturing side that are widget makers or that have components that roll up into these bigger systems or bigger components, they're struggling to figure out where those added opportunities and value add services are. And so if you think of like an engineered product as an example, there's an opportunity to provide that level of engineering services alongside of the product. So just because you're buying the product from somebody, you might need some of those design or engineering services from that company that manufactures that to be able to incorporate that into a bigger picture kind of configuration, if you will. So I think being able to recognize that and recognize some of this value-added capabilities that are inherently already there, but figuring out how to expose those out for others to take advantage of, and specifically your customers to take advantage of. I think there's never been a whole lot of time and energy invested in that, but I think all that has changed and is changing, which kind of ties back to the servitization approach that you're talking about.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite exercises that I do from a marketing perspective is sitting down periodically with the sales team, like with the outbound folks, and just saying, okay, like, what are your customers telling you? What problems have you solved for them this week? What questions have they asked? And that particular question, what questions have they asked? What questions keep coming up has been really, really valuable because, folks like Jim are out there building these relationships, really kind of walking side by side with our clients and our customers and our prospects to help them through whatever journey they're on. And the questions that come up or the problems they encounter are really, they offer huge insight as to, the services that we should be providing or the value that we can be adding up front or afterward to be able to continue that relationship and that customer experience and, do a better job of selling in the future and do a better job of marketing in the future. So I think building in that feedback loop is really important in this sort of era of sales as well.
Absolutely. I agree. I feel as though, making note of questions that I get from, a prospect, that is pretty much them explaining what it is that their issue is. And that is ammunition for me to be able to pull my resources and put it right in front of them. Like I said, shepherd of good resources to my new friend, let's say, and help them along their buyer journey with us. So absolutely, I agree.
I think to extend off of that is to also be able to show solutions that we've done for other customers that solve those challenges as well. So I think it's all fine and dandy to talk about those, but I think when you're able to understand the pain point or the challenge that they're facing and be able to quickly say, oh yes, customer X had this exact same problem. Here's how we approached it with them. And oh, by the way, we'll give you a quick demo of what that looks like, of how we build it out, because I think that drives further conversation and allows the prospective company or prospect to really kind of get a better understanding that we know what they're talking about and that we've solved these problems before.
So I've been exchanging emails back and forth with a prospect, and they told me that they were interested in a vendor portal. And I reached out to Holland and Jessica, and I asked if we had any materials. Is it a webinar or a blog post or anything on us sort of building a vendor portal for a previous client of ours? And sure enough, I ended up sending it over to her, and it, for lack of a better term, I guess it knocked her socks off. She was like, wow, this is great. And so now the only thing that I have to do is make sure that I stay personable, everything that I talked about in the beginning of this Q&A, and make sure that, you know, I guide them along that buyer's journey that we were all referring to, and just kind of bring it on home, I guess. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. And I think, I think that's a great point. I think, then you've already got a proof of concept, right? And not just proof of concept, but proof of delivery and for past customers. But one of the challenges that I've noticed, and one of the reasons that I think this whole sitting down and having these conversations about what customers are asking is so important, is because in the day-to-day, I feel like we solve a lot of problems and we kind of forget. You know what I mean? Like, I see what our team does and all of the value that they add, and they do so much. And I think that they themselves kind of take for granted the expertise and the work history that they have built. And so figuring out a way to extract that from your team, I think, is really important as well. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much, Jim, for sharing your insight and your enthusiasm. As always, it's been a pleasure talking to you. For those of you who are watching or listening, if you have any questions that you would like to see answered, please send us an email, hit us up on social media. We're always happy to talk through whatever problems or ideas you might be working on. And Andrew and Jim, thanks again. Really appreciate it, and happy Friday.
Thank you, Jessica. Happy Friday.
Thank you.